Bye.
Typhoon Ramil, internationally known as Fengshen, has carved a destructive path across the Philippine archipelago, leaving behind a trail of flooded communities, stranded passengers, and urgent calls for relief. As of Saturday evening, the storm had exited Luzon and moved into the West Philippine Sea, but its impact continues to ripple across the nation. The Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical and Astronomical Services Administration, PAGASA, confirmed that Tropical Storm Ramil made landfall in Gubat, Sorsogon, at approximately 4:10 p.m. on Saturday, October 18th. The storm, the 18th tropical cyclone to hit the Philippines in 2025, brought intense rainfall and gusty winds to much of Luzon and the Visayas. At its peak, Ramil sustained winds of 65 kilometers per hour near the center, with gusts reaching up to 90 kilometers per hour. As of 4 p.m. on October 19th, the storm center was located 85 kilometers west-northwest of IBA, Zambales, moving west-northwest at a brisk 35 kilometers per hour. Meteorologists warned that Ramil could re-intensify into a severe tropical storm as it moves farther from the Philippine landmass. Heavy rains triggered flash floods and landslides across multiple provinces. In Estancia, Iloilo, homes were inundated by floodwaters on Saturday afternoon, forcing residents to evacuate or seek shelter on higher ground. In Quezon province, where the storm passed earlier, coastal communities reported storm surges and localized flooding. The Philippine Coast Guard reported that over 3,100 passengers were stranded in various ports across the Bicol region due to suspended ferry operations. Several domestic flights were canceled, and inter-island transport was severely disrupted. The Department of Social Welfare and Development, DSWD, activated its quick response teams, QRTs, and placed all field offices on high alert. DSWD Secretary Rex Gatchalian assured the public that sufficient relief supplies, including family food packs, hygiene kits, and sleeping materials, had been pre-positioned in strategic locations nationwide. We are coordinating closely with local government units to ensure timely delivery of aid, said Assistant Secretary Irene Dunlao. Our priority is to reach the most vulnerable communities affected by Ramil. Local governments in Sorsogon, Quezon, and Iloilo mobilized emergency personnel to conduct rescue operations and distribute relief goods. Evacuation centers were opened in schools and municipal halls, with health workers deployed to monitor evacuees for signs of illness or trauma. Initial assessments indicate damage to roads, bridges, and irrigation systems in southern Luzon and parts of the Visayas. In Sorsogon, several barangays reported collapsed roofs and downed power lines. The Department of Public Works and Highways, DPWH, dispatched engineers to assess structural integrity and begin clearing operations. The Department of Agriculture expressed concern over crop losses, particularly rice and cornfields nearing harvest. We are evaluating the extent of agricultural damage and preparing assistance packages for affected farmers, said DA Undersecretary Christine Evangelista. PAGASA issued Tropical Cyclone Wind Signal number 2 over 17 areas, including Metro Manila, Quezon, Batangas, and parts of Central Luzon. Residents were advised to remain vigilant for possible landslides, flash floods, and storm surges, especially in low-lying and coastal areas. As Ramil moves westward, PAGASA forecasts moderate to heavy rainfall over western Luzon and Palawan. The agency emphasized that while the storm is exiting the Philippine area of responsibility, PAR, residual rains and gusty winds may persist for another 24 to 48 hours. In Gubat, Sorsogon, where Ramil first made landfall, residents described the storm's arrival as sudden and forceful. "The winds were howling, and the rain was relentless," said Maritz Alindigan, a local vendor whose home was partially submerged. "We had to move quickly to the evacuation center." Despite the challenges, community leaders praised the swift coordination between barangay officials and disaster response teams. "We've learned from past typhoons," said Mayor Sharon Escoto. "Our people know what to do, and our emergency protocols are in place." The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, UNOCHA, is monitoring the situation and has offered technical support for damage assessment and logistics. Neighboring countries, including Japan and South Korea, have expressed readiness to provide assistance if needed. Satellite imagery from the Japan Meteorological Agency, JMA, showed Ramil's cloud bands stretching across the South China Sea, indicating potential rainfall over Vietnam and southern China in the coming days. Meanwhile, the local government of Roxas City declared a state of calamity on Sunday following massive flooding triggered by Tropical Storm Ramil. Torrential rains over the weekend turned streets into rivers, submerged homes, and displaced thousands of residents across the city and surrounding areas. In Capiz province, particularly Roxas City, the storm unleashed hours of relentless rainfall, overwhelming drainage systems and causing rivers to overflow. "It's the first time in the history of Roxas City that almost all barangays were flooded," said Melvin Gallagate, head of the Roxas City Information Division. "We've had floods before, but never on this scale." By early Sunday, floodwaters had reached critical levels in nearly every barangay, prompting emergency evacuations and rescue operations. The Western Visayas Regional Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, RDRRMC, reported that 6,061 families, or 18,470 individuals, were affected across Capiz, Aklan, and Iloilo. Authorities confirmed 2 fatalities in Capiz province, including a 44-year-old man who was declared dead on arrival at the hospital after being rescued from floodwaters. 3 others sustained injuries during the height of the storm. In Roxas City alone, 830 families, 2,773 individuals, were directly impacted. Of these, 1,789 families sought shelter in 100 evacuation centers, while another 1,944 families were assisted outside formal shelters. The Sangguniang Panlungsod City Council convened a special session on Sunday afternoon and unanimously approved Resolution Number 263-2025, placing Roxas City under a state of calamity. The declaration enables the local government to access emergency funds, expedite procurement of relief goods, and implement price controls on essential commodities. Vice Mayor Teresa H. Almabis presided over the session, acting on the recommendation of the City Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, CDR-RMC, which earlier adopted Resolution Number 15 endorsing the Calamity Declaration. Mayor Ronnie Didivas mobilized all available city resources to respond to the crisis. Rescue teams, including personnel from the Philippine Coast Guard, Bureau of Fire Protection, and local police, were deployed to assist stranded residents and deliver food packs to flooded communities. The Department of Social Welfare and Development, DSWD, activated its quick response teams and coordinated with local officials to distribute relief goods. Family food packs, hygiene kits, and sleeping materials were delivered to evacuation centers throughout the city. "We are working round the clock to ensure that no one is left behind," said Mayor Didivas in a public address. "Our priority is the safety and welfare of our people." Initial assessments revealed extensive damage to roads, bridges, and public facilities. Several barangays reported collapsed homes, submerged vehicles, and downed power lines. The Department of Public Works and Highways, DPWH, dispatched engineers to assess structural integrity and begin clearing operations. The Department of Agriculture, DA, expressed concern over crop losses in Capiz and neighboring provinces. Rice fields nearing harvest were inundated, threatening food security and livelihoods. Residents described the flooding as sudden and overwhelming. The water rose so fast, we barely had time to grab our things, said Liza Montalbano, a mother of 3 from Barangay Baybay. We ran to the Barangay Hall and waited for rescue. In Barangay Tank, volunteers formed human chains to help elderly residents cross flooded streets. We've never seen anything like this, said Barangay Captain Ernesto Villanueva. But the community came together. That's what matters. The RDRRMC is compiling damage reports and coordinating with national agencies for rehabilitation efforts. The Office of Civil Defense, OCD, has deployed assessment teams to evaluate the extent of destruction and recommend long-term solutions. Experts from the UP Resilience Institute emphasize the need for improved flood control infrastructure and early warning systems. Climate change is intensifying rainfall events, said Dr. Mahar Lagme. We must invest in resilient systems and empower communities to respond effectively. While Roxas City bore the brunt of the flooding, neighboring towns in Capiz, Aklan, and Iloilo also reported significant damage. In Calbayog, Aklan, floodwaters reached knee-deep in commercial districts, prompting temporary closures of businesses and schools. The Department of Education, DepEd, suspended classes in affected areas, and health officials warned of potential outbreaks of waterborne diseases. Mobile clinics were dispatched to evacuation centers to provide medical assistance. Tropical Storm Ramil unleashed torrential rains and strong winds across Samar Island over the weekend, triggering widespread flooding, landslides, and emergency evacuations. As of Sunday morning, local officials reported dozens of barangays submerged, roads blocked, and thousands of residents displaced. The storm, which lingered off the coast of northern Samar for hours before making landfall in Baikal, brought relentless rainfall to eastern Visayas, overwhelming rivers and saturating hillsides. According to the Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical and Astronomical Services Administration, PAGASA, Ramil slightly weakened on Saturday afternoon, with maximum sustained winds dropping to 65 kilometers per hour and gusts reaching 90 kilometers per hour. The storm hovered near the coastal waters of Lawang, northern Samar, moving west at 25 kilometers per hour. Despite its modest wind speeds, Ramil's slow movement and expansive rain bands made it a potent rainmaker, soaking Samar Island for nearly 24 hours. In Calbayog City, floodwaters inundated several barangays, including Cagmanipis Norte, Cagmanipis Sur, Bugtong, Malaga, and Roxas II. Residents reported waist-deep water in low-lying areas, with homes, schools, and businesses partially submerged. A landslide struck Barangay Cagmanipis Sur, damaging homes and blocking access roads. Emergency crews were dispatched to clear debris and assist stranded residents. In the nearby town of Daram, the Jacapan River overflowed, flooding the villages of Binarawan and Canapan. Several houses were damaged, and families were forced to evacuate to higher ground. Local officials said the full extent of the damage was still being assessed. At least 200 families were evacuated in Biliran province, while a landslide in Leyte prompted further precautionary measures. In northern Samar, Governor Edwin Ong Chuan convened the Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office, PDRRMO, and urged residents in flood-prone and landslide-prone areas to remain vigilant. The Calbayog Water District issued an advisory warning of possible low water pressure or temporary supply interruption due to flood-related damage to pipelines and pumping stations. Power outages were reported in several barangays, as strong winds downed transmission lines and toppled trees. The Department of Public Works and Highways, DPWH, deployed engineers to assess road conditions and begin clearing operations. In Barangay Bugtong, residents described the flooding as sudden and overwhelming. "We didn't expect the water to rise so fast," said 62-year-old farmer Pedro Alvarado. "By the time we realized it, our house was already flooded." Local volunteers formed rescue teams using makeshift rafts and motorized bancas to reach isolated households. "We're doing what we can," said Barangay Captain Lorna de la Cruz. "We've never seen this kind of flooding before."